All right, so today we're starting a brand new sermon series. We walked through Matthew for 18 months, and then we talked about a couple of different things. We had a season we paused for politics. We had a season at the beginning of the year we paused to talk about the big three things we wanted to focus on. And now we're going to do a couple of sermon series till the fall. And the great thing about these sermon series that means I've been thinking about these for a while, because as we go through Matthew, there are certain things I wanted to talk about that we couldn't talk about yet. And so all of these things are going to be pretty good. I hope. I'm excited to talk about them. I hope you're excited to hear about them. But this one is all about being fully known, fully loved, becoming who God says you are. And so I want to just start with a question that we often don't slow down enough to really think through. And the question is, well, who are you? Like, who are you? Not your name, not your job, not your relationship status, but deep down. Right? Who are you? You see, that's the question that's the heart of our identity. Your identity is understanding who you are, what makes you valuable, and why your life matters. It's the script, often the invisible script, that shapes the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you live out every single day of your life. Even if you've never used or thought about this idea of identity, each one of us has one. But often, many of us, we build our identities around things like success, relationships, job titles, money, beauty, sexuality, or even achievements. But those things, as you know, they shift, they break, they disappoint. And when they do, because they will, we're often stuck wondering, well, who am I now? What does this mean for me now? That's why this question matters so much, because if you and me, if we build our identities around something temporary or unstable, our sense of worth and purpose will collapse when the shifts and tragedies of life actually come to pass. But when our identity is rooted in something solid, when it's rooted in something eternal, we can stand firm no matter what life throws at us. And the big thing I want us to understand, the big overarching idea for this entire series, is that our true identity is God-given, not self-created. Okay, that's what we're going to be working through for this week. Our identity, Joey, you can go back a slide. We're not there yet. Just look at the TV for now. It says true identity is God-given, not self-created, meaning since you didn't create yourself, you don't get to define yourself. Your Creator does. And so today we're going to start with this foundational question, just answering, what am I? And the question of what am I isn't just a theoretical question for me. It's personal, like perhaps for many of you. I've wrestled with trying to figure out my identity and what I do instead of who I am. You see, our culture teaches us, and you know, the society teaches us that our identities are rooted in the things we accomplished or what we do for a living. You know, when you go to those social settings or you first meet people at work or you're at the coffee shop or even in church, one of the first things people do when you're having that dreaded small talk. Anybody like small talk? 5 of us. Okay, the rest of us, let's stop doing it, okay? Yeah. When you're doing that dreaded small talk is people go, hey, what do you do? You know, what do you do for a living, right? It's centered around our careers because our culture teaches us that you are what you do. And for me, for so many years, and even to this day, it creates a ton of negative emotions and self-doubt. You see, I first experienced this when I was 23. I've told this story before, but I was 23. I became a general manager of a car wash. In 2007, here's the timeline of events. 2007, I was in college, I was an electrician, I was in the Army National Guard, and I deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Well, 2007, 2008, something happened in this country that I wasn't aware of. When I came back in 2008, guess what was gone? The economy. It was fine before I left. It wasn't when I came home. Talk about a shift. They don't tell you that stuff over there. You got other things to worry about. So I came home as an electrician and jobs were gone. Everything crashed. It was a rough time. And I had this fiance waiting on me, who waited, thank God. She waited on me. We're supposed to get married, and I barely have any hours. I'm trying to buy a house. Life is getting complicated. Like many veterans, I just had no idea what to do. And then I got this call, right, this God moment. I got a call from an old manager somewhere I worked in high school and a couple of other times throughout the years who said, hey, can you come be the general manager for us? Again, this is 2008. I'm being offered a job on salary, making more than I was making as an electrician, even if I were to work overtime. I mean, this was just like a blessing, this thing that God hooked up for me. And this car wash was like a car care facility, right? We had mechanics, we had oil change bays, detail bays, car wash. It was this big thing that I would come be the general manager of. And 30 full-time employees, I mean, it was like a great gig for me. And this was all by God's grace. I was able to be on salary. I was able to control my own schedule while I went through seminary. The economy was crashing, but I was staying in Northern Virginia, not West Virginia, for those of you who forget that. But where I lived in Northern Virginia, the average commute for everybody that I knew was about an hour each way to work. My commute was 10 minutes. So it was just amazing. It was such a blessing. However, I would meet people at church or social settings, and the first thing they said is, well, what do you do? I was like, oh, well, I'm a general manager of a car wash. And every time I saw their embarrassment come across their face, they'd be like, do you own it? It's like, I don't have $5 million laying around. No, I don't own it, okay? I just kind of worked there, and I would feel this judgment because there's not a lot of follow-up questions. The questions aren't like, man, you wash any good rims recently? Got any great advice on tire shine? I mean, because car washing is optional. You don't have to do it. The whole job is like, that's what you do. You manage washing people's cars. And you got to remember, where I lived, so many people graduated from college. They're working at the Pentagon. They're working at other industries in D.C. I mean, it's a high, powerful area. And so people have all this stuff, and I'm the car wash guy. And you know what was blessing? Now check this out. Your experience may not be mine, but listen to this. What's such a blessing for me became an embarrassment. I began internalizing this idea that I'm just not good enough. I felt out of place. I mean, I'm not this community leader. I'm not working at this big government agency. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. You know, I'm just the car wash guy. And you're like, well, now, Brian, that's changed. You would think. But we're going to a conference in Dallas. The staff are. We leave tomorrow morning. It's this big church conference, and I can tell you already what's going to happen. Here's how it's going to go. They're going to say, what do you do? Oh, so I'm a pastor. They're like, you're the youth pastor? They're like, no, I'm the lead pastor. Oh, really? What do you think the next question is? How big is your church? We instantly measure people by their worth, by the size. Like, that's what we do as a culture. The pressure to measure up never ends. Well, what's worse is just not the voices from the outside. It's the voices on the inside that I start to believe. That inner dialogue, that sense of comparing, thinking I'm inadequate, I'm not good enough. We're going to talk all about that in week 4 as we close it out. So that's coming. But I share all of this to say that I know what it feels like to define yourself by what you do and not who God says you are. And this is important. I know what it's like to believe other people's opinions about you who don't even know you. I know what it's like to believe that negativity that repeats constantly throughout your head. And what's interesting is no matter how much you accomplish and no matter how much you do and no matter how big things get, it never seems to be good enough, does it? You've never seemed to accomplish enough, have you? It's that inner dialogue that you're not good enough. And maybe that's not your story. But I bet you've struggled to find your identity in perhaps some of the wrong places. Maybe the thing that's defined you is your title or career path. Maybe your appearance or your education or achievements. Maybe even your sexuality, your feelings, or public image. But here's the truth. If your identity is tied to something temporary, Your worth will always feel unstable because, folks, you're going to retire one day. And they're going to find a replacement a lot quicker than you thought possible. Things are going to change. Your beauty's going to fade. You're going to start wearing hats because things start to get a little thin. I wouldn't know about that, but some of y'all do. But when we look to unstable things to provide us security, it's going to lead to a very, very bad place. But what you are is rather simple, and this is true for all of us. Listen, what are you? You are a human being created in the image of God. And we're going to start there. And this is a very basic way, but we're only in week 1. But this is where it all has to start because this is where the opening of Scripture starts for us all. Genesis 1:1 tells us this. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the unfolding story throughout the rest of the Scriptures is about God interacting with His creation. And what we have to understand is right from the beginning, we see this purposeful, we see this intent in creation. And all of us here today have been influenced one way or another by our scientific culture, right? That tells us that things came into existence, perhaps by accident, wasn't purpose, we all just kind of evolved into other things. But we need to set the record straight that the biblical narrative, the story that God communicates to us, is that everything that came into being was very purposeful, it was intentional. And throughout the rest of chapter 1, we see how God created everything. And it's not as detailed as we would like, nor is it written in a way that tells us every single thing and how it all took place. But what's extremely clear from Genesis chapter 1 is this. This is what you have to take away. In the beginning, what? God created, right? So everything was intentional. Everything was purposeful. And then he gets to describing a bit more this human being. Verse 26 says, then God said, let us make human beings in our own image to be like us. They will reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, and all the wild animals on earth, and the small animals that scurry. Don't you like that word, scurry? I like it. I don't know, scurry. Say it. I'm using it in a sentence this week. Animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. I mean, the thing that constantly, God created you. In His image, God created you. That needs to be the story. That needs to be on repeat in your mind. That you are a creation. That there's a creator. And you are intentionally created. Like, that's what the Bible tells us. All of us were created in the image of God. And that's what separates us from the rest of the creation account. Is that only humans were created in the image of God. Now, I've heard that phrase. All sorts of teachers and preachers do all sorts of different things with what it means to be made in the image of God. But at the very basic level, what it's communicating to us is that you and me are His image bearers. We are His representatives on this earth. That's what humans do. We bear the image of God and we represent Him on this earth. And the best example I can give you is not for Jews because they didn't have idols, but if you think of like a pagan temple, they would always put these little idols in the pagan temple to represent their God, right? It would, because the God's absent, the idol or the statue would represent that God. Jewish and Christians, we don't have idols. The representations of God, the image bearers of God are what? Us. That's why we don't have them. We're not idols, but we are His representatives. We are reflecting God's image into this world. And our image bearer responsibilities, He then explains out in verse 28. It says, then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the animals that scurry, there it is again, that scurry along the ground. So our job as human beings, as image bearers of God, is to take care of this earth on God's behalf. We're to multiply it. That's fill it with more human beings, more image bearers of God. And that means that our work and what we do for a living is part of what we do. Governing this earth and all that means. It's okay to work. Work's not a sin. Like all of that stuff is good, but it doesn't make us who we are. We're image bearers of God primarily, first and foremost. And the best way I've heard this described is by N.T. Wright. I'll be right back. I did forget about the curtain, I'm not going to lie. I'm back. The best way I've heard this described is that we are like angled mirrors. Is that in anybody's eye? Okay, here's an angled mirror. So that we are created to be like angled mirrors. You see, a mirror is something that reflects an image, right? That's you. You see yourself. Can y'all see yourselves? Yeah, okay. It reflects something. So like this mirror, we are reflecting God into this world. So we as image bearers, better? Get a little more holy, point a little bit more to the sky, okay. So what we do as image bearers is we reflect God's care and God's love and God's goodness into the world. We steward it on His behalf so that through humans, people can praise the Creator. They can see us go, hey, something's different. They're doing something different. Like everything that we're governing, that we're ruling, they can see God in that. So we are the reflection of God into this world. Hence, why Christianity, Jesus, they care so much about our morality. They care so much about the things that you do, the way you treat other people, the way you're involved with other people. Because in those moments, you are reflecting God, or you should be reflecting God. That's why it's so tragic when a pastor falls or a priest falls. We look at that, we're like, oh my goodness, they're supposed to represent God. But here's the hard reality. Each one of us are supposed to be reflecting God. That's what it means to be human. All of us are. So we're to reflect God's goodness, God's love, and all of that into the world. But in the same way, we then take all the goodness and the praise and the glory and we reflect it back to God. Because as you know, human beings aren't meant to hold glory. We're not meant to hold praise. What happens if somebody just believes all that great stuff people say about them? Right? Pride comes in, the fall comes in, like it never works out very good. So we aren't meant to bottle up glory. We're not meant to keep in praise. We're meant to take all that praise and goodness and send it right back to the one who deserves it. This is what we are. We are angled mirrors. This is our vocation as human bears. You and me are created to be like a mirror. Not hold in glory, but reflect God's goodness and love into the world, and then take all the goodness and the praise and adoration and send it right back to God. That's our job. That's what we do. We are human beings, image bearers of God. And there's no other, listen, there's no greater achievement you can possibly obtain than one that's already been given to you by God. You are His managers on this earth. You were loved. You were known. You were created on purpose. And look what he says. Look what the psalmist tells us about the creative process. Psalms 139:13 says this. It says, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. So God made each one of us. You are not a mistake. You've been handcrafted and handpicked by God. And you're like, well, I got a lot of questions. Me too. I don't have all the answers, but what I can tell you is from a biblical standpoint, you were created on purpose by God, regardless of what your parents thought, regardless of what they intended. You were created on purpose, each one of you, and God played an intricate part on making that happen. He continues, when you understand that you were made and woven together by God, this is what we cry out. We say, thank you for making so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. I mean, could you imagine if you would look in that mirror every morning and say, your workmanship is marvelous, Lord. It's just wonderful. If I'm about 6'2", maybe I'd believe it. But anyways, your workmanship is marvelous. You watched me as I was being formed in the utter seclusion. I was woven together in the dark of the womb. So knowing that every single part of us was created the way God wanted it, we were designed to be exactly how we are, can take a ton of pressure on you to stop being things you can't be, or stop looking ways you can't look. If we just understand that you've been wonderfully created exactly how God wants you to be. Because folks, there are so many things out of our control that we focus on. things we can't do anything about. Our DNA, for instance. There's some things that we just can't do that other people can do. Instead of worrying about all that, maybe we could just focus on the things we can do, right? How we can love, how we can be good, how we can have a better relationship with God. I mean, there's so many things we can focus on. And that's what the writer's telling us is, listen, God created us exactly how he wanted us. Now, Jeb, who's not here this morning, but he's one of our deacons, I've heard him talk about this. I think it was one of his children asked him, hey, Dad, why do you think that happened in the movie? And his answer was, well, because that's how they wrote it. And I went, well, goodness, man, like you just killed all conversations about that movie or story. Like there's no deeper thought, right? He's just like, well, they wrote it that way, that's why. But he's right. Things happen in movies because that's the way they wrote it. The point is, you were designed exactly how you're supposed to be designed because that's how God wanted it. End of story, move on. There's nothing else you can do about that. You are who you are. You are who God has created you to be. You have every single thing you need to accomplish what God wants you to accomplish. And then he continues. Verse 16 says, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of the sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. And the idea that God is still with us, even though he knew everything we'd ever do, everything that you've already done and God chose to still be with you, that's pretty impressive, folks. Well, I don't know about for you, but for me, that he still loves me. He already knew, and yet he's still with me. See, folks, you are fully known and fully loved by God. You are not a mistake. You are handcrafted on purpose for a purpose on this earth. And part of being human means we have to discover what that purpose is. It's going to be different for all of us, but that's the journey. That's what life's about. It's not just the end goal. It's not just about accomplishing and dying. It's about all that in between, living for God, working for God, living all that out for him. And this is the main theme constantly throughout the scriptures, is that we are creatures designed and made for a purpose. And we owe everything to God. See, throughout the scriptures, we see people like us struggling with their calling, trying to figure out how to live, what to do, and all of that kind of stuff. And when it comes to God speaking to them and directing their life, well, they had excuses like you and me. We're not going to get into all of those things today, but I want to show you a couple. When it comes to Jeremiah, it says this. The Lord gave me a message. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nations. So God comes to Jeremiah and says, look, I knew you before you'd done anything. Before your parents even thought about you, I already had a plan for you. And we could take this idea, be like, okay, great, sure, God knows me, loves me, but let me tell you why I can't do what he wants or I can't accomplish that thing. And so Jeremiah continues. He says, "Oh, sovereign Lord," I said, "I can't speak for you. I'm too young." The Lord replied, "Don't say I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. And don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you and protect you. I am the Lord and have spoken." Now here's the point. Jeremiah gave him a bunch of reasons of why he couldn't do what God wanted him to do, but he said it's nonsense. Why? I knew you before you were formed. He's like, I made you. All of that stuff you're giving me, all those excuses you're giving, like we don't need to get in the abilities part right now. The point I want you to see takes them back to the creative purposes. I'm the creator, you're the creature. How are you going to tell me what you can and cannot do? I made you. I designed you. You're going to do what I'm telling you to do because I'm the one who gave you the abilities to carry this out. Moses was the same way. After God was going to rescue his people, he called Moses and said, look, I need you to do this. They had a back and forth for a little while, and then Moses came with this. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied, and my words get tangled. So he pleaded with the Lord, like, look, I can't go and rescue your people. I can't talk to Pharaoh. Like, I'm not a good public speaker. This isn't a word. In other words, he's like, look, God, I can't even pronounce the biblical names. Like, this isn't going to work. There's no way I can talk about this stuff. Like, this is just too much. But it comes down to the creative purposes. Go to verse 11. Then the Lord asked Moses, who made a person's mouth? Like you're missing it here. You're looking at you. What about me? Who made a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or not speak, or hear or do not hear, or see or do not see? He said, is it not I, the Lord? Now what? Go. What are you talking about? Just go. Both of these people, these great prophets of the faith, these amazing characters in scriptures we can both point to, God had to have that come to creator moment and say, listen, I made you. Like, I designed you. Who are you to argue with me and what I've asked you to do? I've created all things. So go. And when we understand that we're not mistakes, we've been beautifully and wonderfully created, it will change the way you view yourself and how you're to work in this world. Instead of getting caught up of how you're not good enough or how you're not pretty enough or how you're not the right size or all the different junk we worried about, just understand you were created and designed by God for a purpose. Just focus on that. Just allow him to tell you who you are. So who are you? Well, you're not trash. You're not sin. You're not an addict. You're not worthless. You're not your job. You're not your career. You're not your sexuality. You're not your age. You're not a product of evolution. You're not an accident. You are a human being, an image bearer of God, created on purpose for a purpose. You don't get to define yourself because you didn't create yourself. You have infinite worth, not because of what you do, but because of who made you and who you're representing. Meaning, all of us are on the same playing field. All of us. Nobody's more important than anybody else. We are all image bearers for God. All people, regardless of background, age, status, color, or story, are valuable because they bear God's image. And so how do you respond to this truth? What do you do with that? Well, this week is simple. All I'm asking you to do is start working through this, because on week 4, we're going to really get into these lies that we choose to believe. But I just ask you to start thinking about those lies that you have believed. And ask you to every morning wake up and reject those lies and start embracing who you are. Because who you are is a human being, an image bearer of God, created on purpose for a purpose. That's who you are. It doesn't matter who you are, that's who you are. That's who God says you are, because what are you? You're a human being created by God for God. And so start rejecting those lies. Every morning wake up and say, hey, I'm made in the image of God, on purpose for a purpose. Just start telling yourself that truth. You'd be amazed on how powerful that can be. And you'd be amazed, folks, on how many lies you choose to believe every single day, every single morning, about what other people say about you, about what you think about yourself, rather than just trusting what God has already says you are. Now, folks, just because we're made in the image of God doesn't mean we're perfect. Sin's broken that relationship with God, and it's cracked who we are as image bearers. We need restoration, but that's what the gospel is all about. That's what we're going to focus on next week, is what our broken identities and how Jesus reconnects and fixes all of that for us. So you have to come back. Don't have time this week. But just imagine with me for a moment, if you believed and I believed, and what if all of us believed that all human beings are valuable, created in the image of God? How would that change the way you view yourself? What if you valued people because God created them rather because of their job? What if they told you they worked at the car wash or they were the president of this big company? It made no difference on how you saw them. Would it make a difference? Do you constantly make connections because of what people can do for you rather than what you can do for them? Just think about how you view people. What if you cared more about who somebody is rather than what they do for a living? What if you cared for who someone's living for than what they do for a living? What if you just focused on the right things, the Jesus things, the gospel-centered things? And what if you saw every person, regardless of gender, race, or background, as a sacred image created in the image of God, as someone who's representing God on this earth? Because you're a human being and so are they. Created in the image of God, valuable and important because he declares that they are. And so what are you to end? You're a human being, an image bearer of God. You're this angled mirror, reflecting God's goodness and greatness into the world, and then summing up all the praise and adoration, not for yourself, but sending it right back to him. That's what worship's all about. And so next week, we're going to dive into the question of not what are we, but who are we, as we work through this even more. Will you pray with me?